to Neurodiverse Generation, the podcast where we flip the script on what it means to thrive through neurodiversity. I'm your host, Jenna Evelyn, and today we're diving headfirst into the quirks, creativity, and challenges of the neurodiverse experience. Whether you're here to laugh, learn, or find a little inspiration, you've found your people. Please note that this program may not be suitable for younger viewers due to explicit language and mature themes. Parental guidance is advised. This show is aired for educational purposes. We are not licensed diagnosticians or counselors. Let's get the conversation rolling. My guest today is a transformational consultant, coach, speaking professional, trainer, thinking partner, and mentor. Colleen Wilson's experience, in combination with extensive training in human behavior, interpersonal neurobiology, the Enneagram, trauma, leadership, and multidisciplinary coaching specialities, helps to guide people, places, and processes to create optimal workspace, home, and school environments. Her vision is to help people create movements that help and heal rather than hurt and harm the people within them. Alongside a multidisciplinary approach and through coaching, consulting, speaking, and training, she uses nervous system literacy and the Enneagram to truly know, grow, and show our true selves. She supports the building of environments needed to bring out the best in individuals, teams, and organizations. She has a deep interest in people with high needs, specifically through trauma, mental health struggles, or neurodivergence, guiding the creation of environments that accommodate these more complex needs so that everyone in the environment gets to thrive. Today is one of the few days when I actually have a coffee with me instead of tea because I have been pulling like all-nighters like you cannot believe to get a whole lot of work done for a Christmas show I'm putting on at the studio where I work. So I just felt I better explain before we get some, iffy things in the comments. I thought she doesn't use coffee on a day-to-day basis.
It looks like a very decadent coffee. Lots of cream, yummy stuff in that.
I'm telling you, Starbucks. And I never get Starbucks.
I drank coffee so that I could have Starbucks too. But last time I drank coffee, I thought I was going to levitate off my seat. So.
Oh my gosh, I felt like that yesterday. This is from yesterday. I took like 2 sips and I was like, yeah, that's a bit too much for me right now. Colleen, your work emphasizes nervous system literacy. Can you explain how this concept can benefit those with neurodivergence?
Yes, indeed. So I actually coined that term because I had come from, I've done lots of coursework, but one of them was I trained as an EQ assessor, so to assess emotional intelligence. And one of the things that we do when we are kind of gauging somebody's level of emotional intelligence or teaching people emotional intelligence is we teach them emotional literacy. So what that means is you learn to language emotions. So I just took that concept and pulled it into the world of the nervous system, which is where I spend a lot of time, and thought, well, if you can language the nervous system, then you can understand it. If you can understand it, you can hack it, you can nurture it, you can work with it, not against it. So the concept is being able to understand things like terms like nervous system regulation, like dysregulation, resilience. So that was really about understanding the terminology so that we could understand the concept so that we could bring it into our lives.
Oh, wow. I absolutely love that. Particularly because, look, as someone who somewhat struggles to place my emotions into words, it might not come across that way. I get told that a lot because I articulate my feelings quite well. But in terms of actually sitting back and going, okay, let me recognize this emotion. Let me give it a name so that I can, start to process it. That's something I often really, really struggle with. And I found this connection between that and my nervous system absolutely fascinating because it's something I never considered before I met you. I recently attended a talk of yours at the Nourishing Neurodiversities and Xeno event. And you spoke about the 5S model for regulating the nervous system. And I think there was an 8S model for adult regulation as well. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about this?
Okay, so I'm gonna start with the 5S model, if that's good.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to this. This is the part I was.
Okay, so the 5S model comes from Dr. Daniel Siegel, and he is a psychiatrist from the US, but he's not, I think a lot of people have got very warm feelings about psychiatrists because they've made a lot of impact in their lives with the right medication and care. A lot of people have a very negative perception of psychiatrists, okay, because the artillery is the prescription pad.
Yeah,
so,
like what is it about psychiatrists? It's either like they don't seem to be many shades of gray there. You've either got a psychiatrist who's like really good and looks at things from a holistic point of view, like mine, or like my old psychiatrist who misdiagnosed me in the first place, who just like doesn't care. It's totally impersonal and it's just about the medication. It's so interesting.
Do you want to jump down that rabbit hole? Because that's a whole other conversation. Dr. Daniel Siegel is, he's an extraordinary psychiatrist in that he believes that every single diagnosis in the DSM manual, a diagnostic manual, can be overcome, or certainly the symptomology can be drastically reduced when there's integration in the brain. Yes. Okay. So, I mean, I've got his books everywhere. He's written lots of them. I've read them all. I've studied them. I did a week with him in Santa Monica in LA.
Wow.
An immersion week where we dived into his work in detail. So that's just some context. He has taught me, and I brought it into my own home and then into work that I do with clients, about this 5S model, because when we create the environment around a person, so a person with a complex nervous system or any human being with a nervous system, and we create the environment that's conducive to nervous system regulation, we will get the best version of that person. So when the environment is not signaling danger, when the person has got these 5 S's in place, their nervous system can regulate, their brain can integrate, which means all the different parts of the brain working together in harmony. And then that, I mean, he was at the extreme saying like categorical psychiatric diagnoses can shift when there is sufficient integration in the brain. So we won't jump down that rabbit hole too far. But what it taught me was that when we do the 5 S's, so let's just do this in the third person. So let's just say I've got a child or a colleague or a friend who is very dysregulated in my company, and I 5S them. That is when I see, soothe, create safety, build secure relationship, and offer support. So those are the 5 S's. So what I do is I see, first of all, which means really seeing behind what's going on, not seeing somebody who's crying or screaming or shouting or withdrawing or fidgeting or whatever. You see behind that and you go, okay, yes, what's going on here? Because the behavior is just symptomatic. And as parents, as teachers, as leaders, we focus always on behavior. We like, stop doing this, do more of that, don't do that. But
well, traditionally, I think a lot of us were raised like by behaviorists in terms of the parenting model, right?
100%. In fact, the parenting model from days gone by, which a lot of people still follow, is called behavior modification.
Yeah.
So if I smack your hand, you won't touch that thing. If I punish you and take that away, then you'll learn not to. So I'm going to modify your behavior. But it doesn't ask the question why. Why is that? And so when you've got especially a neuroatypical sensitive nervous system, there's no conscious why. Nobody wakes up in the morning and go, oh, well, today I'm going to lose my shit. I'm going to lash out at somebody. I'm going to sabotage a friendship. I'm going to make sure that I screw up work. I'm going to fail my test. Nobody wakes up with that, right? But these are the behaviors that happen. You fight with your friends. You refuse to go to school, whatever. And so seeing is seeing with your heart, with your mind, with your ears, with your entire being, what's going on behind. And what's always going on behind these behaviors that we don't like is a dysregulated nervous system. So that's the seeing.
Absolutely.
Then the soothing, I mean, we could talk for 12 hours on these 5 S's, but I'm going to breeze through them. The soothing is about how do we bring calm to that nervous system? How do we regulate it? Because if we want the child to now go to school, or we want the argument to dissipate, or we want the person to be able to work creatively, or whatever it is, we need to bring the nervous system down. And there's a whole lot, depending on the person and the situation, that can be done. But the point is that soothing is the next step. Because once a nervous system is soothed, that person can transition into whatever it is that they have to do, or stop doing what it is that's not, constructive. Then safety is around physical, emotional, spiritual, mental safety, because if any of those are threatened, even if it's just perception is reality, then that person, sorry, my calendar's ding, dang, donging over here.
So mellow. I'm waiting for mine to start hitting me with alerts too.
So safety is about understanding that if that person perceives a lack of safety, even if it's not reality, that means their nervous system cannot be regulated because they're worried someone's going to shout at them, they're going to get into trouble, they're not going to get something finished, they're not going to be liked, and they're going to be.
And what's important to recognize, what's important to recognize there is that kind of sense of safety isn't necessarily, like you said, it's perceived. So it's not necessarily rational or logical, which makes it quite difficult to communicate on their part, even if they do have the words. I experienced that firsthand.
Completely, 100%. So then the person who's around them has the role and the responsibility and the opportunity to just bring around a soothing, and then and safety, and restore safety, and then create security, which is around secure attachment, which is just when the person feels safe in the relationship. Okay, not just in the environment, but in the relationship. They know that that is the secure relationship. And then the last one is support. And so you might actually ask the person, how can I support you? Or you might just be thinking in your head, what would be the best support here? If it's a child battling to get into the car and go to school, is the support to pick up their school bag and pick them up and give them a big hug and help them in, if the person's battling to do their work, is the support to sit next to them and just say, you've got this, I'm right here, and just bring your laptop next to them, and what is it? So it's just that thought process about what does the situation need. So those are the 5 S's of nervous system regulation.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think as someone who's dealt with like comorbid chronic social anxiety before I got on my meds, and even a little bit since, I think this model is so useful for understanding your body's response to whatever perceived stimulus you're kind of dealing with. And in that scope of anxiety, this can be so useful for so many people. The 8S model is somewhat similar. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So the 8S model is really more for caregivers now. So the people, and having said that, it's for everybody with a heartbeat and a brain in their skull. So, but it's really about looking after ourselves. So this is more a self-care model than it is a nervous system regulation model. But of course, when we look after ourselves, we regulate our nervous system, because ultimately that is always the goal, because the nervous system drives our behavior, it drives our thinking, it drives our health. So it drives up inflammation, it drives up cortisol, it drives up adrenaline, or it down-regulates them. So it implicates everything. Okay, so the 8S model is around, I'm going to see if I can try and remember them offhand now, but it's around social.
I'll grab the cheat sheet.
Oh, good.
Okay, hit me. Let's go.
Okay, so social, understanding that community and connection is key. Again, safety. So for the caregiver, making sure that there's places, even if life isn't safe. So maybe there's a relationship that isn't safe, but that there are safe places you can go. As a coach and a mentor to lots of people with complex situations at work and home, I am their safe place, and I'm the place that they can say anything to. So as long as there is that in your life, that these little pockets of safety, and an
awareness of the different roles I think that you play in others' lives is quite vital there.
Completely, completely. That hyper awareness that we can, and when we are around people, they are either in a state of growth and expansion or they're in a state of protection. There's two states there. You either
Light
like a
switch.
space for me, which might even be like people that are close to you, but maybe they're volatile, or there's been betrayal or hurt or something. But so we either in growth and protection. And so who do you want to be for other people? Do you want to be the person that allows other people to feel expanded and in growth, or contracted?
Yeah.
So, those are the choices that we bring to relationships. So social safety, then somatics is linking the body. So looking after ourselves through movement, through body care, through the senses. Our 5 senses are the gateway to our nervous system. So when we are looking at beautiful things, smelling beautiful things, hearing beautiful things, we are feeding our nervous system like nourishing food for it. So somatics and sensory, surrender was another one, just letting go.
Yes.
Not an easy one.
Sensory safety. We've got spirituality, simplicity, self-talk, and share is left.
Yes.
Look at me with my cheat sheet. You sent it to me. But yeah.
So everything she said.
I love that. It's the model. So can you tell me a little bit about the spirituality side of things? Because I think when it comes to your self-care, you're kind of keeping things as simple as possible. That is somewhat self-explanatory, but spirituality can be such a unique, subjective experience.
Yeah, you're 100% right there. And it's often one that people don't talk into because it can be, what do they say? Don't talk about sex, politics, and spirituality or something. Taxes or but generally it's like, because there's so much division in the world, so much division. So my way is not your way, and your way is wrong, and my way is right. And so what I'm talking about is I'm like, whatever your methodology is to connect to something greater than yourself, whatever your pathway, whatever your belief system, do more of that. Engage more with that, because and even if you are atheist or agnostic or conflicted, then engage gratitude and awe, because those have a very similar response in the nervous system. So when tests have been done and people are in prayer, in meditation, or in cultivating gratitude and awe, it's the same response in the nervous system. It creates the same level of regulation. So if it's as simple as being able to go outside and appreciate the stars on a given night, even if you live in a tiny little apartment 25 floors up, you can still see the stars, and engage that sense of awe and wonder at this incredible, universe that's above us. So the tests, the scientific research is there, gratitude, awe, and spiritual or contemplative practices are very, very nervous system regulating, and they're free.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. I found, as someone I was raised Christian, I decided in my high school years that there were just too many questions that couldn't be answered for me, etc., etc. Christianity wasn't for me. So I looked into a whole bunch of other religions, including Satanism. I looked at all of them, Colleen. And one thing I did find is that a lot of religions are all based on the same, ideology, actually, ultimately. But the biggest thing was that spirituality and religion aren't one and the same. One can be an incredibly spiritual person without necessarily being religious, but that does take a certain heightened level of awareness that you're talking about. And you did mention something when you spoke at the Nourishing Neurodiversity event about hypo and hyper arousal, which I found fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, sure, absolutely. So I like to I'm an Enneagram 5, okay? So it means I like to take complex concepts and make them very simple and distill them and offer them on in ways that are effective for people.
Yeah, and easy to digest, right?
Correct. So having studied a lot of different courses and read a lot of material on trauma and having experienced, I love that, or my understanding and the way I love to explain it is that we've got this sweet spot in the middle, okay, nervous system regulation. Like you can call it the window of tolerance, it's the ventral vagal state, it's the flow state, whatever you want to call it. It is that like everything's just, it's cool. You're feeling okay, you're productive, you're relational, you're engaged, you're clear, beautiful. We can't live there forever, okay? You're not going to live there when you burn your hand on the stove or when somebody screams at you. But that's the goal, the aspirational state. And then we have hyperarousal, so hyper meaning greater than, more than. So we are escalating out of that into more of the louder state, so more like the angry outbursts, the sort of maybe
high energy,
high energy. It's like blah, explosive, okay. And hyperarousal, hyper under, down is that subdued state of the nervous system. So this is where you get withdrawal, depression, just that sort of resistance. It's the low ebb. So you kind of got the
protective
red and the blue here, yes. And then you've got the sweet spot in the middle.
Amazing. I think that this framework can be so, so useful as a tool just to understand whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you are neurodiverse yourself, just in terms of understanding how to self-regulate again. I know it's something that I didn't necessarily learn right off the bat. I didn't learn to emotionally regulate at the time. Other kids did. And it impacted me hugely. And I think a framework like this and this kind of awareness could really, really help so many. So thank you, Colleen. That's truly amazing. I wanted to find out, how can parents and leaders create environments that foster mental wellness for neurodiverse individuals?
Sure, that's a big question.
It's multi-layered. It's really, we can go into this for like 12 hours.
No, we could. Everything that we do, everything starts with awareness. Okay, so, and if we're looking at the 5S model, that is seeing. Seeing is awareness. And awareness encompasses knowing. So it really is about wanting to know the people in that environment, truly choosing to see the people in the environment, being aware of the impact of environment on people. So that is the very, very first step. There's no action that can be taken until there's a getting by the teachers, parents, leaders, that there is complexity in their people, there is diversity of processing, of cognition, of behavior, of emotional regulation. There is diversity, there is divergence of that, and seeking to understand and be aware of that there are things that can be done that are going to either negatively or positively implicate those people. So those strategies are far and wide, because it depends how the divergence is presenting and what that person's needs are. So, I couldn't go into strategies here. Suffice to say that individualized strategies are absolutely key. Understanding that perception is reality. So you might think, oh, you've got a lack of workplace and a great culture, you've got a loving family, it's all happy days, but something in that environment is signaling danger in the nervous system of the person with a complex, highly sensitive nervous system, which is taking them away from being their best self. So about understanding that perception versus reality and what needs to be done in order to bring safety, signals of safety to that person. But essentially, if parents, teachers, leaders follow that 5S model for the environment as a whole and for each individual within it, it's actually not a massive undertaking. Once you get it and you realize this is that particular person's needs, they have a need for silence when they are overstimulated or dysregulated. Picking up patterns, exactly. So it's awareness, it goes into knowing, which is pattern recognition, and then it moves into support, which is about, so what does that person actually need? But when we've got the lens of the nervous system on as a parent, teacher, leader, that automatically happens because you're automatically aware of creating those elements in the environment, because that is what will be conducive to your people bringing the best version of themselves forward, which is all we can ask for. That's all we want. We don't want everyone to be a cookie cutter image of each other. We just want everybody to be able to be their best self.
I love the emphasis. I really appreciate the emphasis that you place on the fact that it's a choice to try and see things through a different perspective,
Totally.
I really love that. Okay. So you speak about the power of environments. What practical steps can someone take to make their own home or workplace more conducive to well-being?
Okay, so we straight back to the 5 S's again, but because the 5 S's will create a conducive environment, but the person who is aware of this and who is wanting to create that environment, that in order to be the person that can do that, their own nervous system needs to be regulated. Okay, you can't create a conducive environment if you
back to 5S. I mean 8S as well.
Exactly. So you've got to be able to. So I often say that as parents, leaders, and of course as teachers, our own emotional regulation is one of the biggest gifts that we can give ourselves and everybody around us.
Okay. And it can be very difficult.
Very, very, especially if you've got somebody with neurodivergence around you who is highly dysregulated, or somebody who's struggling with their mental health, which means they're highly dysregulated, or somebody who's very stressed, which means they're highly dysregulated. So now, because generally that comes with tricky, expression. And so the person trying to cultivate this conducive environment is obviously going to be triggered or stressed in response to whatever's going on. So their work on themselves, our work on ourselves as parents and leaders and teachers, is very, very key to be able to be resilient and flexible, so that when something happens, we're able to feel the feels and maybe be irritated or be hurt or whatever, and flex back to regulation quickly, so that we can continue to create that 5S environment.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a double-edged sword. There's 2 sides to that coin as well, because there's a lot of pressure, I know, that parents in particular place on themselves in terms of, I need to, they take responsibility almost for regulating their child, which is, I mean, taking responsibility for recognizing it and for your role in making that easier for them, that's 100%. But a lot of the time this gets translated through into a lot of self-criticism, don't you think?
It really does. It really does. So guilt and
shame,
regret and shame and blame, and it's so much a feature in homes with complexity, because there are complex situations, there are complex relationships, and things often don't go well, and we often don't show up as the best version of ourselves. So it really is tricky. And this notion of co-regulation, which is really, really important, especially when kids are younger, or absolutely when kids are younger, but even when they're older. I mean, my kids are 15 and 20, and they'll still co-regulate, just less, obviously, because they've learned to regulate themselves more. But we will co-regulate with our partners, So it's just about my nervous system and your nervous system in a dance that's healthy, okay? And that your regulated nervous system can help my nervous system to re-regulate. So that's co-regulation.
What a gorgeous way of looking at it. It's our nervous system's doing like a dance in harmony. That's beautiful. That's co-regulation. I was trying to think, how do I explain co-regulation to a listener who doesn't have a psychology background? And you just did it like perfectly.
Well, it's actually also so co-regulation's well spoken about, and even, in neurotypical circles, moms groups and things, you'll hear co-regulate your baby. But Dr. Dan Siegel, who I was talking about earlier, Daniel Siegel, is actually the forefather of interpersonal neurobiology, which is a very, very fancy term for the science of relationships. So interpersonal, between you and I, neuro, nervous system, biology, body. So how my nervous system is dancing with your nervous system. So I've also studied his work a lot in that context and understanding that we implicate each other. So
That
what happens,
interrelational aspect. Yeah.
correct, is that when parents are not able to co-regulate their kids because they are also dysregulated, that can create a lot of guilt and responsibility and pressure and regret and all of that. So it really is a big issue, which is, as you say, back to 8S, look after yourself so that you can be that person your child most needs you to be. But also, like I talk about the 80-20 rule, like just give ourselves the grace to completely and utterly screw it up at least 20% of the time. We don't have to be perfect. So,
yes! Thank you, Colleen.
Give ourselves permission to not have to be that person, because we're never going to be. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. No one can get it right 100% of the time. Because a lot of this relies on your capacity to show yourself grace. And I always say, one of my favorite sayings is, grace shown is grace given, in the context that you show grace to yourself in front of your kids learn to show grace to themselves. And that is ultimately such a valuable tool to teach neurodiverse kids at a young age, for sure. How has your personal journey shaped the way you help others move from stress to success?
Okay, yeah, lovely question. So, when I had my first child, who, as I said, is now 20, I could not understand how in every other area of life, and I know this isn't the same for every parent, this was my journey. Like I was in flow, I was on top of things at work, good social life, everything was good. But at home, oh my God, I was just this like raging lunatic, reactive, emotional, just intolerant, impatient. And I really did not like myself as a parent. I was like, what is going on here? And then I had my second child, and by that stage I'd started diving in because I was already doing coaching and transformational work. And I was like, why am I so in flow in other places, but my own child in my own kitchen, I'm like losing my shit. And
why am I so triggered?
Exactly. And I did not have the understanding that I do now. So again, Enneagram 5 deep diver. I was like, okay, I'm gonna just get on top of this. Like, what is going on? And so I started taking that personal development work and professional development work and moving it into the space of parenting and understanding. And that's where I came across Dan and the science of parenting and interpersonal neurobiology and the concepts of an integrated brain and co-regulation, etc. So
thank God for people like you, Colleen, who do the research so that those of us like me who procrastinate with doing the research don't have to.
Exactly. The world's full of all different people. So exactly that. And I always have a burning desire to offer on what I learn. And so as my kids grew and their complexities emerged, I took every one of those as a challenge to try and deeply understand, deeply see, and understand who I needed to be for them in that situation, given the complexity. So it just drove me forward. And yeah, then I wrote course material and articles and all sorts of things to try and help other people in the same situation.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's stunning. And I love that was your go-to response, was there's something that's not connecting here. How do I meet the situation where it is? And it takes raw honesty. It takes being very real with yourself in sometimes a rather uncomfortable way. So really kudos to you for that, as a mom, as a facilitator, as a speaker, as an expert in the field. You're sure as hell paving the way for the rest of us.
Thank you.
Oh, no, of course. I would love to know, what role does emotional resilience play in managing stress and success, especially for those in leadership roles?
Okay, so resilience is the aspiration of the nervous system. And essentially what that means is that when we go into hyper arousal, the resilience is that we can bounce back to that sweet spot,
that window of tolerance.
Yes, we can get back there faster, we can stay there longer because we're resilient. So if you think about a fern that's waving in the wind and a huge gale force wind comes and the fern gets pushed right down like this, but then the wind subsides a little bit and boop, it pops straight up again and it's happy as Larry. It's back to its previous self. It's not broken and bent and ripped out of the ground. It's back. Boop. And so we want to be like
note here. I'm making a
yeah.
note here. Find laid back Larry. He's got the answers.
Laid back Larry. Yeah, so that's resilience, and it's so we need to build nervous system flexibility in order to have resilience. So balance is always the like, oh, we need balance in our life. We need, like, for some people, especially with a neurodivergent brain, they're like, what? How do you even spell balance? Like, what does that? Like, it's no, like you said, you just work 36 hours straight, and like, what is balance? And flexibility means, cheers to that. Flexibility means we can go work for the 36 hours straight and then do what we need to do to come back into a regulated state, which might mean sleeping for 24 hours or whatever the case may be. But we're aware of ourselves, we're aware of our body, mind, spirit, and heart, and what we need in order to re-regulate. And that's the bounce back. That's the resilience.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's broken down so gorgeously. How do you see the connection between the nervous system, like regulating and fostering creativity in neurodiverse individuals? Because I think, look, it goes without saying that, creativity can't, it's not going to happen. It can't be there. It cannot exist in an environment that's tense and that's in that, hypo state of arousal where it's like, oh, I'm going to protect myself, or I'm completely dysregulated, or it's near impossible to access that side of yourself when you're in that state, right?
Mm. No, totally. So creativity is an output of a regulated nervous system. And so the awareness that we can't access that, as you've just said, when we are dysregulated. But I think the important thing to understand is that creativity is also a regulator. So when we're feeling dysregulated and we engage in something creative, now this might mean making a lovely salad dressing. It's not like I need to go and do something mammoth, or like paint a painting or redecorate a room, or not at all. When we engage beauty in some small way, and you just make a really beautiful salad, or you, I don't know, put on a lovely outfit, be creative with how you dress in the morning, understanding that when we pull creativity in consciously, because we know we're not feeling great, so we do something that has that kind of expression, it is nervous system regulating in itself, which can then help us to be more creative. But there is an inextricable link between creativity and the nervous system in terms of that input and that output, which I think is important for any parent and leader to understand. You're not going to get out of your people what you need to get out of your people if the environment is not conducive to nervous system regulation, because then they can't access creative thinking, creative output. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that the fact that it's a bit of a catch-22 can be quite interesting. As a neurodivergent myself, I found that just taking the time, giving myself the time and space to play, because my brain will automatically kind of down the artistic side of things, or I just need to give it that leeway and step back a little bit. And I found weirdly that ties in with leaning into my ADHD, because we're taught, I've seen, like, throughout my studies, that we're taught, okay, this is the condition and it's wrong, so this is what one needs to do in order to treat it to make it better. On the flip side of that, if you had to lean into your neurodiversity a little bit more, you can engage with things like your hyperfocus, all these incredible strengths that come alongside that neurodiverse condition. But it takes leaning into it first, right?
100%. 100%.
Can you share any specific techniques that you recommend for building resilience in your fast-paced, high-stress careers? Like, I know I tend to, I do really well, weirdly, in high-pressure environments, provided I've got that buffer zone in between those periods to recalibrate, recharge, kind of sort out the social batteries and everything, and then I can do it all over again. What are some techniques that you use or that you recommend for that sort of thing?
Are you saying to build resilience?
Yes, particularly in those high pressure environments.
Okay, so there's a couple of things, a couple of ways I can answer that. The one is the awareness that we all have like a zone of proximal development where we are in that spot where we are constructively challenged. Okay, so now we like on top of things, we're productive, things are happening, we are learning, we are doing, and then it can tip over into where it's not constructive. And so the awareness of that is something that we need to be aware of within ourselves. So when we challenge that zone, then we get to build a little bit of resilience. So we push, but it's a dance, and it's a very mindful one, because you want to push a little bit to see that you can, to reduce the stories in your head that might say, oh, I can't stay up later than 10 o'clock, I'm too tired, or I don't like going out with more than 5 people, or I don't do deadlines. Like, these are all things that are awareness of self, but they're also limiting stories. So we can grab hold of the stories because they make us feel safe, but we then never grow. And so you're asking the question, how do we grow resilience? We've got to take our stories and we've got to challenge them a little bit. And so that is something that only that we can do in mindful ways. And then we go out a little bit later, or we engage a little bit more socially, and we're like, oh, look at what I did, and I'm fine.
Yeah, so 100%.
That's building resilience. It's also being able to, develop something like a mantra and understand, like, this too shall pass, or you've got this, and knowing that moments of hardship are generally, not always, but generally episodic. So they come, but they go. So it might be a deadline, or an argument with a colleague, or a very tricky client, or a project. It's stressful, it's going to go. So it's about the mantra and the dialogue with self. That's like, you've got this. Like, this is tricky. And again, back to emotional literacy, being able to acknowledge how we feel in a situation builds resilience. So having a little and being able to reference it and go, this is what I'm feeling in this situation, and name it and own it.
There's so much power in giving our emotions those names, and and creates the capacity then to break things down into slightly smaller steps, so that it doesn't look like this massive elephant you've got to eat all in one go. Oh, there was something I wanted to say and then I lost it. It's going to come back.
I was talking about the emotional vocabulary. So when we are able to name our emotions, we're able to pull a left and right brain functioning into play, because it's less just the emotions, right and limbic. We're able to engage the left side of our brain through language. And so to be able to go, I'm frustrated, I'm stressed, I'm worried, I'm exhausted, but I'm also hopeful, trusting, excited, and so we sit with the polarity of emotions, and we acknowledge them. We are literate. We articulate them. We bring our full brain into that, awareness of where we're at emotionally. So we've engaged the mental with a mantra, with like, this too shall pass. We've engaged the emotional with, I'm feeling this, this, and this, and this, this, and this. We engage the body with some sensory experience, and we like, while we're under pressure, we pull something, like, I've got my diffuser going here, I've got my resistance bands under my chair, which I play with on my feet. So we build
the essential oils, the soft lights. I've got them all over my room.
So we bring a multi-dimensional strategy, because we are body, mind, heart, and spirit. And so when we're engaging in anything in life, actually, just on the daily, but we're talking about stressful situations here, when we're engaging in a stressful situation, we then engage body, mind, heart, spirit, and we bring a full strategy forward that's going to support us to be able to get through whatever the challenge is well, not just surviving it, but getting through it well.
What a useful tool for neurodivergence. I mean, like me, for example, who I struggle often to see the forest for the trees, if you will, to see that bigger picture, to see that, these things will come to an end. Like this difficulty is something that is going to pass, because I often just see it recurring and recurring and recurring and recurring, and I don't see those gaps of space to recover, to deal with it in between. And that was particularly difficult when I didn't have the tools at my disposal necessarily to actually recalibrate in those times. So I love this conversation, Colleen. This is something that definitely needs to get out there. How do you integrate mindfulness or body awareness practices into your approach to leadership and personal growth, particularly when it comes to, creating an inclusive culture, whether that's in your home, in your workspace, that sort of a thing?
So mindfulness, and I also love the term bodyfulness, because it's not just presencing in the mind, it's also presencing in the body. So to become body aware. And these are quite personal endeavors, to bring them in a workplace is quite tricky, because, what as a leader, what are you going to do to cultivate mindfulness in somebody? People have to cultivate it in themselves. So it is just this awareness of our states of thinking and our states of being in our body, and being able to be present to them. So we can be mindful in micro moments. Okay, mindfulness doesn't mean that we now need to go and do a 2-hour Zen meditation sitting up cross-legged on a wooden floor. Yeah. Mindfulness is just about being aware in our minds, bodyfulness, being aware in our bodies, being able to be present. So that racing, there's like rumination over the past, and did I do this yesterday, and was that person pissed off with me, and was that good enough, and there's anticipation, anxiety about the future, and is it going to be okay, and what am I going to say, is it, how am I going to be, and will I get through it? And so we are like stuck in the past and future, and so disconnected to the present. And it's so hard, because the past and the future orientation are there to keep us safe. Again, the brain's like reflecting on that, and it's anticipating this. So it's trying to keep us safe, but actually what it's doing is it's taking us out of the here and now. And when we become mindful or bodyful, then we engage into the now. And so the best way to do that is actually to engage the sensory system again, because if you're smelling something beautiful, like I've got a whole blend of balance oils, doTERRA balance oils in my diffuser, and if I'm smelling that now, I can't be smelling it in the future. I can't be smelling it in the past. I'm smelling it now. So it's presencing my nervous system to now.
Incredibly grounding.
Very. So if I'm moving my chair and I'm like moving my resistance band under my foot, and I've got that proprioceptive input by push and pull in my foot, which I'm doing right now, I'm presencing my body to the now. And because this is a sensory experience, and the senses are a direct feed into the nervous system, it's signaling to the nervous system everything's okay right now, because you've got this beautiful smell. I'm looking out my window, I can see the birds and the trees, it's everything. So I'm presencing. I almost find that a more useful term than mindfulness, because mindfulness, people are like, oh no, I can't do that, like Zen stuff, sorry. Presencing,
I'm not a yogi.
No, it's just to pause for a moment. And I think the key word is to pause. You pause, and you just take stock. You just presence into the moment. Where am I? My body's on the chair. I can feel the cushion under my bum. I can feel the hard floor under my feet. I can feel the resistance band. I can smell the thing. I can hear the birds. And you presence into the moment. And that's how we become more aware and more mindful and more bodyful in a far more, I think, accessible way, right? It's far more doable.
Definitely, particularly because this is, again, a double-edged sword where, as someone with social anxiety, I can tell you, and I experience that sensory overwhelm, or I used to quite frequently. It's not as common anymore. But it does mean that my lines kind of get crossed between being like hyper aware and being overly sensitive to certain stimulus. And this is so important in creating that distinction. Colleen, you have placed so much into context for me, and I'm sure for most of our listeners here today. Thank you for your wisdom and for your framework and for kind of just reeling in those, like, that mess of thoughts that kind of categorizes it and compartmentalizes things in a way that we can see things a little bit more clearly. Where can people contact you?
Yeah, so a website, I guess, is always the best way, ColleenWilson.co. Email is Colleen@ColleenWilson.co. But on my website is, all the links to my YouTube and my podcast and newsletter, which is always super value add. So yeah, at least in this day and age, just Google me.
Amazing. Love it. We've got a bunch of free resources that Colleen has offered our listeners. Thank you very much, Colleen. I'm going to put the links for those in the description below. It includes her 8S and 5S models, as well as a stress test that you can take for free online on her website. Like I said, those links will be in the description below. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. We will catch you for another episode next week, same time.
Awesome. Bye.